Welcome to part 8 of our Mouse Maze game. Yes, we are on part number 8. There are that many parts, and hopefully this will be the last one if we can work through this quickly. Now, I promised that we'd be able to make our game look a little bit nicer. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to drag it to the bottom, and I'm going to call it background, or BG for short. And I'm going to lock all of my layers besides the background layer, and I'm just going to show my intro screen just so I can see it on the stage. Use my rectangle tool. I'm going to make sure it has no stroke. I'm going to change the fill to our rainbow gradient, and I'm just going to click and drag a small box onto our stage. Using our selection tool, I'm going to select it. I'm going to go into our align tool. Make sure that align to stage is checked. We want to match the width and the height of the stage. We're going to align it to the center, both horizontally and vertically. And now what we have is a background that'll carry over between our intro screen, our end screen, and all of our mazes. And I'll prove that by beating this one level. And there we go. Now we have this background that will be shared for each maze. But what if you want to put some artistic flair onto each level and maybe make it like you're navigating through a house or something along those lines where you want the background to be different for each maze? Well, this is not the way to do this. The proper way to do this is to put the background inside of our maze. So I'm going to delete the layer BG, and we are going to go into our library, and we're going to open up maze 1. Let's create a background layer. So I'll just call this BG, and let's lock our base and point layer so we don't accidentally override it. And let's pretty much do the same thing. I'm just going to make a blue background for now. And I'm going to draw a square. Part of it's not going to be visible because it's behind our base layer. But I'm going to draw a blue square, select it, go into our our align panel, make sure align to stage is checked, match the size, and then center it up. And why is this not matching? Hold on one second. Okay, what's going on here is that there's no real stage to align to, because we're inside of our movie clip. So there's a little cheat to get this to work. I'm just gonna delete that blue square we've got, go back into the stage, and we have to create our blue square on the stage and then move it into our maze. And I know that's kind of annoying, but that's just what we have to do for now. So I'm gonna make a new layer, and I'm just gonna call this work, just so we can have a layer to work on. I'm gonna hide the intro screen and lock everything else. So only layer we have is work. I'm going to make a blue square now. I'm going to select it, go to our align panel, I'm going to align it to the center, and I'm going to match the size of the stage. So once we have that done, we can right click, cut our square, and now we can go into maze 1 and click on the BG layer, right click, and click paste in place. That didn't work. Okay, so let's just align it to the center, and now we're good. So now we have a background on our maze, and let's go ahead and test this. And there's one problem with this. Maybe you can have a little bit of foresight and figure out what it is. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and click start, and we instantly lose a life. Why is that? Well, let's go ahead and look at our code for our actions. So in our actions, on the main stage, in our update game function, how do we check to see if the player won or if they lost? Well, first we check to see if we hit endpoint.mc in our maze. If they hit that, they've won. But if they hit anything else in our maze, we're going to say that they lost. So what we need to do is specify which part of our maze is going to check to be hit for losing lives. And how we can do that is if we go into our library, go into maze 1, and what we can do is let's lock the BG layer. We'll just leave it blue for now, and we will unlock base. We're going to select what's inside of base. We're going to tap F8 and turn it into a movie clip, and we're going to call it maze 1 hit. And this doesn't really need to have any sort of format, but I'm going to call it maze 1 hit so that I know what it is. And actually, I'll format it just like we did our maze 1 and just tack on hit at the end. So that way it lines up nice and pretty alphabetically. And this is all we have to do in terms of turning it into a movie clip. Now we have to give it an instance name, and we're just going to call it hit, H-I-T, lowercase. And in our base layer, let's just rename this to hit, so that we know that this is our hit layer, and this is where the mouse, if it hits, they're going to lose. So now that we've done that, we can go back into our actions, and instead of checking to see if maze, if we hit any part of our maze, we want to check to see if we hit, the hit part of our maze. So just like how we check to see if we hit endpoint MC, we want to see if we hit our hit movie clip. And let's test this by saving and running. Excuse me. And now if we press start and click, now we're good until we hit a wall. And does this end work? Yes. And you see now our background has changed for our maze 2. But there is a problem with maze 2 in that we don't actually have a hit movie clip. So if we were to run maze 2 and we click start, it would throw an error. So let's go ahead and fix maze 2 as well. So I'm going to select maze 2, double click on it. We are going to select our base layer. So we have only our base layer unlocked, so our points layer is locked. We can just press Control A, it'll select everything. And what we're going to do is tap F8. We were going to name it Maze 2 Hit. All right, so once we click OK, now we have Maze 2 Hit. Let's give it the same instance name of Hit, because remember, our start points and our end points and then our hit layer all need to be named the same. And now let's go ahead and put in a background. So I'm going to do this really quick. I'm going to save this, go into our library, go into Maze 1. Let's copy our background over. So I'm in Maze 1. I'm going to unlock our background layer, click on it, select copy, go into our library, go into Maze 2, make a new layer, call it BG, and we're going to right click and actually let's lock base first. Make sure you're on the background layer. Right click, click paste in place, and there we go. And now let's make this another color. Let's just make it a gradient from a dark blue to a light blue. Or, I mean, you can really make it whatever you want. It's just personal preference. But now we have this. And so now if we save and run, we should have a maze that has its own unique background. And you can see this one's different, and this still works the same. And you can even make this background rainbow if you'd like. And yeah, everything works. So, good. So now we have a separate way of making backgrounds. So far our mazes need to have 3 parts, right? They need to have, or I guess 4 parts. Well, first of all, let's walk through this. They need to have a class that matches this format. So the maze, so the word maze, uppercase M, then a letter, or sorry, a number following it. So maze 1, maze 2, maze 3, maze 4, maze 5. Then inside of it, it needs to have a movie clip that's called hit, that'll contain every part of our maze that the mouse will be checked against for a loss. It'll need to have a start point called start point MC and an end point called end point NC. MC, not NC, sorry. And if you just duplicate your mazes and change them, that's the easiest way to not even have to worry about that. So now that we have that done, let's go ahead and create one more maze. All right, so just because there's one other problem that I want to tackle, we are going to duplicate maze 2. So we're going to right click maze 2, press duplicate, and we don't want to call this maze 2 copy. We want to call this maze 3, and we want to export for ActionScript. Come on. There we go. The class needs to be maze 3, just like the name is. Click OK, and now we have maze 3, but we don't have a hit layer or anything like that. We actually still have our maze 2 hit layer inside of it. So let's go into maze 3, right? And what do we want to do? Our background, let's change this background to, let's say, a green gradient, just for fun. And we are actually going to get rid of our base layer. So just get rid of the, oops, what did we forget to do? We forgot to rename hit. Okay, so remember in maze 1 we renamed it hit. This one we left it as base. So real quick, let's do some cleanup. we're going to call this layer hit, and let's go back into maze 2 for just a second and change it from base to hit. All right, so now if we go into maze 3, we should have points, hit, and BG. So what do we want to do? Let's create a pattern that I kind of whipped up really quick, and I think it'll be pretty fun. So we need a layer to kind of work with, or we can just do this by hand. There's multiple ways of doing this, but let's lock our hit layer. We'll make a new layer, and we'll just call this, leave it layer 2. Doesn't matter. We need 2 layers to work with, and that way we can position things and not have to worry about overwriting. So first thing we're going to do is we are going to use our oval tool. We are going to, what do we want to do? We want to make the fill, let's just say yellow for now, and make sure there's no stroke. We're going to click on this layer 2 here, and click, hold shift, and maybe even alt, whatever, doesn't really matter. Just make a circle that's decently sized, and there we go. We're going to copy this circle, paste it, and move it far away. Make sure it's not touching. We're going to use our free transform tool to shrink this down just a little bit, or you can use the transform up here to change the scale width and scale height, but I'm just going to use the free transform tool. I'm going to click and hold shift because it still needs to be a circle, and once I have that, I'm going to change the fill color to be any other color. Just it can't be yellow because yellow won't work because we're trying to overwrite some stuff. So even help. Let's use this light blue. So we're going to select this circle here and this circle here. In our align tool, we are going to align them to the center and to the center. And once we click away, these two are going to fuse together and overwrite. Now, if they don't overwrite like mine did, you need to make sure that when you're drawing, you do not have object drawing checked. So if yours looks like this when you're drawing, you need to get rid of it. There's some weird kind of box around it, you did it wrong, okay? So make sure object drawing is not checked, and then this will work. So now that we have that, let's delete our center. And I think this actually needs to be a little bit bigger. So I'm going to use my free transform tool. I'm going to click on a corner, hold shift and alt to even have that spread around the center. And we can move this around. It doesn't matter if it overlaps start and end or anything because those layers are all locked. Doesn't make a difference. So now we have this. And what we need to do is split this thing in half. So I'm going to copy this. So right click, click copy. I'm going to lock layer 2. On layer 3, we're going to paste it. And now, because it's on another layer, we can do whatever we want, wherever we want. And we still want this to be yellow. But what we're going to do now is we're going to cut this thing in half. And how accurate you are with this doesn't really matter. But how we're going to cut this in half? Well, change the fill to some other color besides yellow. So I'm going to say light blue. And we want to use our rectangle tool. Now, I'm just going to eyeball this so that it's about center. And that looks about good to me. And now that I've covered that up, I can just delete this here. And now we have half a circle. And what exactly are we going to do with this? Well, we need it to be about 75% of the size it was before. So let's go into our transform panel. And underneath scale width and scale height, you can just constrain them. That means they'll be linked together. So if you change one, it'll change both. And we're just going to change this from 100 to 75. And will 75 work? No, 75's not quite the size. So not 75. Let's try. It needs to be bigger than 50. That is for sure. It needs to be bigger than 50. Let's try 60. And if we have 60, we have that. And basically, we need to copy and paste this. We need 2 copies of it. Use the free transform tool. Hold down shift, rotate it around. And what we're going to do is make this sort of yin yang, oh man, whatever it's called, pattern. I can't speak today. And if this is hard to see, you can turn on outlines so that you can see just the outlines of your shapes. And basically what we want to do is get these kind of, oops, well, I guess it's hard to move them now. So how's this? Let's turn off the outline, click on one, click on the other by holding shift. So click on one, hold shift, click on another. We'll change the color for just a second. So let's say light blue again. And that way we can line this stuff up. And because these are on different layers, we can actually center them. So let's do this, right? Unlock layer 2. We're going to select these three shapes we've got, and we're going to align them to the center of the stage. We are also going to align, oh no, that's not going to work because these are overlapping. Okay, my bad. You can see this can be a little frustrating. So let's move one so that it's, I don't know, at the top of our screen. We just basically need to get these to not overlap. So don't let them overlap. Put them kind of over the screen, like so, something like that. Select them all, and if you click and drag, make sure you get everything. So click and drag, fill up the whole thing, and we're going to align them to the horizontal center. So now we know that these two things are aligned in the center, and if we move this up just so that they're not touching, we can kind of make sure that it's even. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on one, hold shift, tap the down arrow, let's say 3 times. So 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to do that to the other one. Sorry, not the down arrow, the left arrow 3 times. I tapped to the left 3 times. Click this one, hold shift, tap to the right 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And you can see it's not quite where we need it to be. Or maybe it is. I don't know. Let's tap it 2 more times each side. So I'm going to tap this one, 1, 2. And I'm going to tap this one, 1, 2. All right. And now what we're going to do is, now they're touching. So if they're touching, it's not going to work. So I'm going to move them back to where they're at 3. Something like just make sure they're even. All right. It's kind of difficult to play around with. If you want symmetry, this is how you do it. If you don't and you want to be sloppy, that's fine as well. But what we're going to do is we're going to click on this one here. Let's tap up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Just so that it's kind of out of the way. So we move this one up 9. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. Okay, this one's at 7. Let's move it back up to 1, 2, 5. So we're going to move it 5 down. And this one should be the same. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4. So now they're 5 and 5. But these are kind of too close together. So I'm going to move this one to the right one, move this one to the left one. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Just enough so that there's enough space that you can get the mouse through. And if you're having trouble following along with this, just end up with a shape like this, and there's really no worries. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on both of these. So click, hold shift, and we're going to use our eyedropper tool to turn them into this yellow color. So click and held shift, select both of them, use the eyedropper tool, click on the yellow. Now they're yellow as well, but they're still on their own layer, so they're not going to join together. So how do we join them together? Click on both of them, right click, click cut. We're going to make sure we go on to layer 2 where this circle is, and we're going to right click, click paste and place. And now you can see, because they're the same color, they've all fused into one shape. So we can get rid of layer 3, and we can even get rid of layer 2. So let's cut this and move it into our hit layer. So and make sure that gets unlocked, and just paste it in place. And now we've have this pretty cool shape where we have this kind of navigation that we can work with. So now that we have that, let's make a rectangle and cut a small hole in the side here so that the player can jump through and maybe even go to another side. And I'll show you what I mean in just a second. But let's take a rectangle, right? And let's make it another color. Let's say cyan or light blue, whatever you want to call it. Cut a hole in this thing here, and I'm going to make it decently big. So just draw it over it, click it, delete it away, and now we've got this nice little shape here. So now that we've got that, let's click and drag it to the left. And what I want to do is I want to turn this into a movie clip. So let's go ahead and, do we want to do this right now? Let's give this a shot. Hold on. That rectangle cut, let's make it dead center. I'm not sure if this will work if it's not center. So what we're going to do, I'm going to hide the points layer just so we have this. And you can see this thing kind of looks pretty cool, right? Could be like a website logo or something. We're going to take a rectangle, once again, make it cyan, okay? And make sure you have no stroke still. And we're just going to click and, I don't know, something like that, right? We are going to align this to the horizontal center of the stage, or sorry, vertical center of the stage, and make sure this big circle we've got here is also in the center. So when we do this, we can drag this over and make sure that it covers enough so that you could actually go all the way through. Click on that point, delete, and there we go. And I'll explain to you why I did that in just one second. But I'm going to save because that was kind of a lot of work. And I'm going to select this circle, tap F8, and I'm going to turn it into a movie clip. It does not need to be a class or anything like that. And we are just going to call it, is it yin yang? Oh, I'm Googling this right now. Yin yang. Or is it yin and yang? Duh, that's okay. Yin yang. That's what it is. Yin yang. Okay, so I'm just going to call it yin yang. And I'm going to click and drag this over to the side. I'm going to well, yes, you could right click, but I'm going to copy and paste it. So we have 2 copies of it. And I'm just going to drag this one over to the side here. And what we're going to do is under the transform panel, we're just going to flip it around. So make sure the constraint is unlocked or this won't work. And we're just going to flip this so that it faces the other way. So I'm going to say negative 100%. And now we have this pattern that's pretty cool looking. And if we align them up nice and pretty, there we go. So if they got out of line, you can just use your transform tool, align them to the vertical center. And you could even turn this into a full, let's go ahead and do this, right? Let's tap F8 on these 2. And we're going to make this our hit layer. So we're going to say maze 3 hit. All right, so everything inside here. And let's line this up to the center. So I'll align it with our horizontal center, align a stage. And now we just need to get this to fit. So let's shrink this down just a teeny bit. So hold down Shift and click on a corner and just get it to fit in your stage. And if it doesn't fit perfectly, that's fine. But I want mine to fit. So now we've got this cool shape going on. And make sure you change your hit layer to say, actually have an instance name of hit, not say, it needs to have an instance name of hit. So that way, when we test our game, it actually works. So what we've got here, now we need our start and end point set up. So start and end are a little too big. Let's move them over. So lock the hit layer, unlock points. Under start, we're just gonna click on one side. Or actually, let's make these even. So hold down Shift, make sure you have start and end selected. We're going to go into our transform and we are going to lock, we're going to have the constrain so that way they keep their proportions. And we're going to make these, let's say 75% of what they were. And so we made them 7, let's undo that. Let's make them 50% of what they were. So they're a little tiny for this one, but this way we can put them in the corners of our shape. And you might have to nudge these into place with the arrow keys, but just get them so that they line up so that the player has to go from one point to another. So now that we have all that done, let's go ahead and test it. Back into our main actions, tap F9, and we are going to cheat so that we can, here we go, let me get this actually open. We're going to cheat so that we can jump to that level right away. So let's go up to the top, up to the top, up to the top, and okay, let's do this right now. Let's give the player 9 lives, or technically that'll be 10 total. We want to say 9 to start, just because 3 is a little, I don't know, we're going to end up making a lot of levels, so let's leave it at 9. The last level number is not 2 anymore, it is 3. And the current level, let's start on, remember we need to put it the level before, so we're going to say 2. So we're going to start on level 2 when we run our game, and that way it should put us on level 3 when we start. Good. If we click start and lose, good. And if we click start and make it all the way through, we won. Okay, now that one level isn't very difficult, and I'm going to show you something pretty cool on how to make it better. So let's go into Maze 3, double click, and lock our points layer, unlock hit. We are going to go inside of our hit layer. All right, and we can, let's actually make a new frame. We will call this sweep. All right, we can lock layer 1 because we don't need to mess with it. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a little sweeper effect that's going to go from the left to the right of our stage. And we need to get the size of our stage again. So before we do anything else, back to the main stage, go to our work layer. We are going to use our rectangle tool, and I'm going to make one that's, let's say yellow, so we match up that color I had there already. Now I'm just going to drag like that, and because it's snapping, it already aligned it to be the same size of the stage. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select it. I'm going to make sure line of stage is checked, and I'm going to match the height just to make sure that it's the same as my stage. So I'm going to select it, right click, click cut. We're going to go into, let's see where we want to go. We want to go into Maze 3 hit, right? And on our sweep layer, and let's just, can we zoom out a little bit? We can. We just want to paste in place. Okay, once again, it's being difficult. And what we're going to do is we're going to align it to the vertical center. And we're just going to drag this out far enough so that we know it's going to be off the side of our stage. And how do we know? Well, we could set this with code if we wanted to, or we could just, I mean, negative 400. And we can kind of guess it. Let's guess it for now. We can test this later. So I'm going to turn this into a movie clip first. And I'm going to call this sweep. All right. So movie clip, registration in the center. So now we have a movie clip. And does it need a name? Right now it doesn't need an instance name, but we're going to go inside of this and we're going to make this look pretty cool. So click on this yellow square here, go on the color palette, and let me line this up so you can see better. So I'm going to make this not 200, let's make it 100. And okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go, once this is selected, we're going to use our color palette. We're going to change this to a linear gradient, and mine's already pre-made. Okay, let's do this. Let's make this just this linear gradient here, the white to black, and in our colors panel, let's go ahead and make something cool. So in the beginning, we want it to be yellow, and we don't want it to fade to white. We want it to fade to, let's just say yellow for now. And what we're going to do is this yellow here, we're going to give it an alpha of 0. All right. So if your color changed and it's no longer yellow, see, if you click in the wrong place, it's not going to work. So I'm going to undo. So double click on this, right? Click on the alpha 100%. Type in 0. And you notice how these F's here didn't change, and now they just did because I selected something else. But type in 0 and make sure that yellow is selected. So if it's not selected, it'll fade from some yellow to like some weird kind of color. And now we have this sort of shape that looks like, and maybe this is hard to see, but it looks like, you know, like a laser scanner type thing. And once we have that done, all we're going to do is we're going to jump to, let's say, how long do we want these people to have to complete our level? Let's say it's 30 frames per second. So let's give them 5 seconds to start. And we'll say on frame 150, we're going to insert a keyframe. All right. And what we're going to do is we're going to drag this to the other side. So I'm going to hold shift, click and drag, just so it's off of our stage. And if you're not sure if it's aligned or not, align it to the vertical center. And we're going to create a shape tween. Shape tween will work for this. And if we go back to frame 1 and press play, you can see we have this effect of it fading or scanning across one side to another. So let's test this by running. Make sure we have everything done correctly. We press start. There is our fader. Oh, because we shrunk it down. Oh, man. Okay, so we shrunk our movie clip. This is all inside, so our fader doesn't actually fit inside of our stage. So let's correct that really quick. We're going to go back up into, we don't want to go into Maze 3 hit. We want to go into Maze 3, okay? And this is just something you kind of have to play around with. So in Maze 3, we can see the actual size of everything. And what happened was we changed the size of what our little shape was supposed to be. So the way we fix this, what we need to do is scale this back up. So if we change this to 100, our transform, now it's the right size, but now it doesn't quite fit. So we have to do a little bit of cleanup here. And this is just kind of, if you make a mistake, this is what you have to do. So I'm walking you through this process. If we double click, we're inside now, right? And we have these two shapes. Well, let's unlock that layer. We have these two shapes. We can just select them both. And using our free transform tool, we can just click a side, hold down shift and alt until they fit relatively in our stage. And then we don't even have to move our start and end button. So now, because this movie clip that our whole thing is inside of is now the proper size, our scanner bar here, or sweeper bar, whatever you want to call it, is now the proper size to fit the whole stage. So it really didn't matter because it covered it anyway, but this is just for you to know. So click start. Okay, so our thing went, right? and then if we wait, it'll go again. So someone could be really clever and just wait and then go after the thing goes. Let's what if we wanted that sweeper, oh oops, because of weird stuff. What if we wanted that sweeper to only start playing after we click start, or any other animation for that matter, right? Because some things, the timing matters if you want to do something like this. What we can do is we can go into all of our mazes and make a layer called actions, and that way we can hold a function that will say, hey, start our animations. So a couple things we've got to do. In our library, we have our sweep, right? So go to our sweep, double click on it. We need to create a new layer, and it should only have one frame really. So let's find that last one. So I'm just clicking, hold shift, right click, remove frames. So we just have one frame here. We're going to tap F9, and what we're going to do is write the word stop, open close parentheses, semicolon. All right, and let's rename this layer to actions. And if we run now, our animation is never going to get played, so the sweep should never actually show up, but it should be somewhere way off the side of the stage. Good. How do we get it to play? Well, in our, oops, where do we want to go? We want to go into our maze 3. All right, into maze 3. And what we're going to do is make a new layer, call it actions. And we're going to make a function in here for our main stage to call. So say function, we need to give it a name. I'll call it start animations. And we're not going to return anything, so it'll be void. And all we got to do in here is start playing our animations that we want to play. So because each individual maze is going to have different, what do we want to call it? Different animations to play, this is going to look slightly different for each maze. So we're still going to need to have this function in every maze, but you don't have to put the same exact things inside it. So before we go ahead and put anything inside of here, let's copy this layer, this actions layer. So right click, copy layer, and let's put this in our other mazes. So we want maze 2, oops, click on maze 2, go inside. We're going to click somewhere up top. We're going to say paste layer, and if we go under actions, it should look exactly the same. Let's go into our library in maze 1, double click, make right click, paste layer. Same thing, should only have start animation. So now every one of our maze has a layer called actions where it has these start animations function, or this start animation function. So back into maze 3, which is the one we were working on, now that we have everything set up, in our actions, we want to actually start playing this sweep. So let's go and double click on this. Let's give sweep, our movie clip, a name. So I'm going to call this sweep, and it is inside of our hit movie clip. So the way we're going to access this is by saying hit.sweep. So in F9, we're going to say check our hit movie clip for the sweep movie clip, and then all we want to do is play it whenever we call start animations. So if this is all set up correctly, we won't have any errors, but it's still not going to play our sweep movie clip. That's because we haven't called it yet. So what we want to do is back into our main stage, and we can get rid of this work layer if you like. Go into your actions, and we want to check to see where we start the level. So we want to start the level, and well, what did we put that as? We said when we click, well, it's going to be a click. So let's do this. Mouse event, click, start level. Oh, there it is. We called it start level. So select that, press Control F to search for it, and just click Find Next. Here is our function start level. So if we start the level, what do we want to do? We want to say maze.start animations. Oops, animations. And that needs to be spelled just like we spelled it in our maze movie clip. So let's just say start all timed animations. And now if we run, and click start. Let me just make this bigger to show you that it's working. When we get there, nothing's going to happen, but we click start. There we go. And now we only have a certain amount of time to actually finish the maze. Pretty cool, right? So that's pretty much all there is to it. So all of our mazes are going to need a couple parts. I'll go over this one more time because you are going to have to make your own mazes. So let's go into this. We will check out maze 3 because we just made it, right? So the parts that we need to have. So we're going to have 4 layers. We're going to have a background. So that's just our custom background that's not going to be checked for being hit. We have a hit layer, which is going to contain every single object that is going to be checked to see if the mouse hits it. We have our points layer, which has our start and end points. And then our actions that contains this start animations function and any animations we want to start playing when they click start. All right. So remember that our points need to be named exactly the same, so they should be called, or their instance names need to be start point MC. The end name needs, or the endpoint name needs to be endpoint MC. And you could even change these shapes, use completely different movie clips, and it'll still work as long as you give them the same instance names. But those two, the start and end, need to have the same instance names for every maze. Underneath hit, our hit layer, everything that is going to be checked against to be hit needs to be inside a movie clip with an instance name of hit. So in this case, it's our sweeper and our cool little shape here. And any animations will go inside of this that we want to play. So you can give them an instance name if you want to play the animations and have the animations inside the movie clip. And then if you want to stop the animations and wait for the start animations call, just make sure you put a quick actions layer on it and just says stop. All right, so those are all the pieces you need. If you're not quite sure or you forget, that's why you have maze 1, 2, and 3 to look at as reference. And the very last thing you want to make sure you do is that, or maybe it's the very first thing, but when you create your maze, make sure it has the same name, so it's maze and then the number, and that it's exported for ActionScript. Okay, and that the class matches that name that we've generated. Okay, so I know that's a lot, but if you want to check it out, I mean, you can look at the properties in the library. You can click around these movie clips. Your shape might not look as pretty as mine, and that's fine. It's kind of difficult to get things lined up nicely. There are ways to do it, but you kind of just have to play around. And I've been using rectangles and ovals to make my shapes. You could actually draw this with a brush tool, and it will work exactly the same as long as you put it in the hit layer. But besides that, back into our main scene, remember, let's go into actions and let's clear this up. In the very top, very top, what do we want to do? So current level num. So we want to reset this back to 0. And we'll say to test, let's keep the caps similar. So to test at start, set the number equal to the level to test minus 1. All right, so if we wanted to test level 2, we want to put in, well, what's the level to test minus 1? 2 minus 1, we want to put in 1. All right, the number of the last level, so every time we add a maze, we need to increase this by 1. Because if it tries to pull a maze that doesn't exist, you're going to get an error. And now we've reset that. We're no longer cheating, and we have pretty much a full game. All right, so another thing we want to say, how many lives the player has left, means that total, the player will have lives left plus 1 lives. Or you can even say chances. All right, so if we say 9, remember they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 0. Or I guess 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then 0. So it ends up being 10. So lives left plus 1. Right now there's 9. They have 10. And that way you know later on when you want to change this or maybe adjust your game that that's how it's going to work. So that was part 8. This is going to be the last part of this maze. And I'm going to have you create a couple levels on your own, but that'll be its own separate assignment. So that's what you're doing next.